The 1980s defined pop culture like no other decade thanks to its neon-lit nightlife and a royal rumble of the ages between pop stars and hair rock bands for the defining sound of iconic action flicks and cheesy crime dramas. It's arguably the beginning of modern nostalgia as we know it today, that memory of a time or place you may have never even visited before. There's a reason we still hold such a close attachment to it, right? It's a vibe, an immediately recognisable aesthetic, the image of a distant future that would, ironically, merely recycle what we've already had by those who grew up under its influence, reliving it through artistic mediums which allow new generations to experience a small slice of it. And there is no greater example of 80s nostalgia than GTA Vice City. Today I want to get into how this title became so iconic because, as we've already discussed, Rockstar pretty much invented this genre of game, so I'm interested to see how Vice City builds upon that foundation while also experimenting further with cinematic parallels, for better and for worse. The first thing that should be mentioned about Vice is the incredible turnaround of a bygone era where you were getting banger after banger like this every single year. And it wasn't just Rockstar doing this either. I find it to be a fascinating comparison to the industry we have today, which seems locked into this idea that games need to be these overcooked monsters. I mean, we've been waiting for what, 12 years for GTA 6 now, and suddenly the bright lights and warm sand has blinded our judgment for what is probably just gonna be another Grand Theft Auto game. Let's be real. Sure, it's still gonna kick ass and I cannot wait, but I mean, come on. The longer the wait, then the more there is to live up to, which is the perfect analogy for my experience playing Vice City. While I really want to tackle this series of games analytically, it's impossible not to include some of those core gaming memories because, in all honesty, that's all I ever really wanted out of this channel, was to be able to share my love for the things that I grew up with. But here's the thing, I didn't actually grow up with this game. In fact, I'd never actually played it until GTA 5 was on our doorsteps in 2013. See, while I was not allowed to play the GTA games as a kid because my mum thought that they'd corrupt my innocent little brain, I still got my hands on San Andreas at the age of 12 in 2008. I'd later play and complete both GTA 3 and Liberty City Stories before moving on to number 4 in high school. So in the meantime, all I'd heard was praise for Vice City, how it captured the 80s Miami atmosphere expertly and perfected many of the issues I'd had with 3, only to find myself quite underwhelmed finally playing it, if I'm being totally honest with you guys. I mean, sure, I had fun, and it was nice to see another iconic title, and I did like the game, but that's where my feelings kind of ended. And for years now I felt that maybe I'd spoiled myself, playing it only in anticipation for what would end up being the highest grossing game of all time at its launch. But now that I have played it for a second time, I can confidently say that this game is far from perfect. Alright, and look, we're gonna get into why that is throughout the course of the video, but for now, let's just get ourselves established into this new, vibrant world. Landing in Vice on orders of his mafia boss up north, Tommy Vercetti, voiced by the original Goodfella, the late Ray Liotta, sets not only the tone for this story of a lone criminal looking to take over the streets following a drug deal gone wrong, but also sets a precedent for the series and the industry as a whole with the death of the silent protagonist. I know people had been talking in games for years, but at this exact point in time, if GTA is doing it, then everybody is following in their example. With no one else to turn to but your pissy pants lawyer Ken Rosenberg, we're quickly thrusted back into dealings with the head honchos who run the city, performing odd jobs and building trust. For the first time, the game's cast features many big names from Burt Reynolds, Danny Trejo, Busey, Dennis Hopper, and even Philip Michael Thomas, who played Tubbs in Miami Vice, which, as you can see, Rockstar were clearly fans of. Or thieves, depending how you look at it. Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery after all. But have you ever actually compared the intro themes side by side? So it's not just the atmosphere or the soundtrack delivered through arguably some of the greatest radio stations in the franchise to date, which give the game its 80s vibe. The cherry popper on top is using appropriate actors to give the entire thing a seal of authenticity, if you ask me, which is really important in setting the scene for this period piece. We're set up with a safe house on the beach which shows off one of the many all-new interior locations, which has got to be the game's greatest evolution out of the gate. Being able to go into houses that you've purchased or businesses on the street really adds an extra layer onto what was already a convincing world, along with the mix of additional vehicles including a range of motorbikes, boats and aircraft, all now fully realised. The freedom of that sandbox has just been expanded greatly, and the game wastes no time in showing off all that it has to offer. But before you slip too deep into rampages and riots, I always suggest a bite of pizza and completing the new Delivery Boy side mission to upgrade your health, along with any of the other returning, well-reputable lines of work on offer as a way of immersing yourself into the city. As I discussed last time while talking about GTA 3, we can really begin to break down what makes an open world good or bad by the finer details it focuses on. Graphically, the game is a stark contrast to the drab concrete jungle of Liberty. Vice is washed in a much warmer coat of paint for its beachside setting, bikini babes and board shorts are abundant, and colour is always punching through darkness in the more glamorous areas of the city. Again, I'm playing the original Steam port running only the most essential graphical mods to get it looking crisp, yet still authentic as the day it launched, and it still holds up really well. While I've got absolutely nothing against the visuals in 3, Vice makes it look like a prototype in comparison when we get in close and personal with pedestrians and other characters. And if Tommy wants to fit in, then he needs to find a clean fit that suits him, which is another cool addition, allowing the player to lightly customise who they want to portray, which, even for 2002, was still sort of a novelty, especially for a game like this. And the same can be said for all of the other details, including shopping in the malls, practicing your firing at the gun ranges, and participating in vehicle challenges at both the stadium and various off-road courses found around the map. It's not all just novelty though, as Vice introduces a core mechanic that quickly became the standard for driving games, now allowing the player to dive out of a vehicle. Having to wait for the flaming car to come to a complete standstill before slowly dragging your worthless carcass out to safety is so old school. Now, if you're in danger, this sharp addition to the moveset, I'm sure that we all take for granted, really ups the pace on those police chases. And speaking of the police, let me tell you, they're probably the most tactical and effective police force in the entire franchise. Man, they're brutal. The bastards lay out spike strips all over the place to fuck your ride up nice and thorough. This does bump up the difficulty, which is fine given the quality of life fixes elsewhere. You know, crouching behind cover can make the gunfights a little easier, and just in general, I find there to be far less difficulty spikes due to video game fuckery like last time. But even if you do get stuck, the sandbox nature really allows you to prepare for missions in multiple different ways. The first time I played this through years ago, I was having a lot of trouble with the last mission due to just the sheer onslaught of bad guys you need to gun down, so to counteract this, I just hid a tank nearby and fired it into the mansion until everyone was obliterated into a fine paste. And trust me, it goes great on toast. So trial and error isn't all bad, as it can often add an element of preparation before all of the madness goes down. And in doing so, you quickly familiarise yourself with the map and start to plan out the most efficient means of getting the dirty work done. Which means that it's impossible for me to ignore Vice City's first glaring issue any longer. Alright, let me start off by saying that for this section of the video, the last thing I want is for it to turn into a dick measuring contest regarding the size of these maps, okay? Because, trust me, I know more than anyone that it's not about the size, it's how you use it. So I really don't care about measuring both of these maps from top to bottom to see which is bigger, or trying to lay them on top of one another to find some sort of technical answer like that, because if you want to get technical, then Vice is the bigger map according to the numbers. So then why the hell doesn't it feel like it? Why does this map feel insignificant, unplanned, and for lack of a better term, boring? My greatest nugget of praise for the previous game was that the main character was the world itself, and sadly, I can't say the same this time, which is really upsetting because I do really want to enjoy this map. As I mentioned, it takes on a totally different atmosphere than the previous world, but there is just nothing about it which really stands out for me. While the land space may be larger to create the appearance of sprawling beaches and the Florida Keys, the spread out nature ultimately hurts the illusion of world building. Liberty City was incredibly tight and compact, which was not only a solution to a rather large technical hurdle at the time, but also served the purpose of portraying this play area as a dense populated city really well, I think. And that doesn't mean that there weren't any odd spots that seemed out of place or disturbingly empty, but the cold atmosphere ultimately tied up many of those loose ends. Whereas here, stumbling into those empty spaces, which sadly there are just as many of, and all of them much larger than before, it simply doesn't make any sense contextually. You know, the warm beaches should be bustling. Why is so much of the terrain in this game completely wasted? And the golf course is the perfect analogy for what I'm talking about, as it serves no purpose. You come here once for a quick mission early on into the game, and then aside from the odd collectibles, there is nothing here. In comparison, GTA 3's subway is never used for the narrative aspect of the game, yet it still serves a purpose, a function within the game, and one which helps to build that character of the overall landscape. The golf course in Vice doesn't do shit. I mean, maybe if you could play golf, then I wouldn't be making such a big deal out of it, but I guess when I'm already presented with what feels like a downgrade, seeing such a large chunk of land smack bang in the middle and never having a reason to go there just twists my foreskin a little bit. And taking that into consideration and including other locations which also serve zero purpose whatsoever, you know, such as the vacant beaches and sprawling docklands which offer nothing of relevance, it's clear to see that the playable space does feel drastically reduced in comparison. It's pretty embarrassing when you realise that this tribute to Miami is actually outshined by its original interpretation in the series debut. Which is definitely a bold statement, sure, I can see that, but let me put it this way. Vice City in the first GTA game wastes no corner of the map. Everything is used for something at some point, and even mundane spaces are used effectively as direct links between key areas. Whereas Vice really doesn't seem to understand how all of this should connect to itself. Now, on the flip side, as long as what we do have is fun to mess around in, then what's the issue, right? And that is true. You know, I do still want to give the game credit. I know that I'm rattling on, but the return of stunt jumps which blend in more naturally is a great example of the world's personality shining through once again. You see so many of these ramps and can immediately picture a crazy police chase launching through these different areas. Finding hidden packages all over the map, which, by the way, start to pile up in your apartment, which is a detail that I've never noticed until this playthrough, also encourage that exploration, but it's just not enough before I start to notice that lack of attention starting to creep in again. See, here for example, I thought that this was going to be another stunt jump, but no, it just launches me up onto this roof. Well, that's cool, let me explore around a little bit. Maybe there's a hidden collectible up here or a small cache of weapons. Hell, there is that one mission, which is fucking awesome by the way, where Tommy jumps his bike from building to building in a race against the clock. So, maybe I'll find some more unique jumps up here. Nope, nothing. There is nothing to see, and I just don't get it. What happened to the puzzle platforming elements of the exploration, huh? Where are the interesting alleyways with unique moments that encouraged gameplay? I mean, hell, even if they were only present for that specific purpose and nothing else, at least they had a purpose at all. It's disheartening. I mean, that's the best phrase I can think of to explain it. You know, give me a reason to explore off of the beaten path, because let me tell you, driving these two main roads up and down the first island over and over again, and the single highway up the second island, gets tiring very fast. I'm just sick of it. Give me something to explore. That's the thing that really shocked me replaying Grand Theft Auto 3, was that I was not expecting to get so invested in the exploration factor of that game, because, you know, as soon as I started looking up stunt jumps and the hidden packages, I discovered this bountiful world of puzzle platforming and, you know, almost like a collectathon sense, you know, like the games I grew up with, which was really cool, and it really added so much to that open living world. You know, and there's just nothing like that in this game. I don't feel like I'm ever rewarded for trying to scout out some, you know, hidden location. It's a real shame, if you ask me. Even the returning Rampage missions, they're often plonked in pretty obvious locations, and man, talk about easy. There's no ultra hostile areas of the map like last time, so gunning down groups of gangbangers and bikies is no trouble. Thankfully, Rockstar defined their style with this game by including so many Easter eggs to be found around the map, from pedestrians wearing cement shoes, caricatures of real-life figures, and all of the references tucked away or hidden in plain sight. References are fine, I'm not knocking it, but maybe I'm just jaded given that modern audiences are bombarded with references all of the time as the main meat of a product. And, hell, speaking of meat, check out this slaughterhouse. The Scarface fans wetting their panties right now. Look, despite what I've said, these details do make taking the time to explore feel somewhat validating, more so than the game's actual hidden objectives if you ask me. Especially from the perspective of someone who had never actually seen Scarface until I was working on this video. I appreciated the shady world building it does on its own merit. It creates intrigue around exploring and helps the virtual space to feel lived in. Like perhaps another player has been through here before us and what we're seeing is the result of someone else's actions. But that effect can only last so long once you're aware that so much of this is rather blatant.
Lesson number 1. Don't underestimate the other guy's greed!
Alright, it's time to talk Scarface, but don't worry, this ain't a history lesson, and I also won't bore you to death by listing out every detail that Vice City replicates, but I do want to get into the nitty-gritty of how this film influenced not only the game's narrative for better and for worse, but also how it created maybe the most important gameplay concept of the franchise. So yeah, like I said, I'd never actually seen this classic film until just the other week, and now I finally understand why this is such a defining piece of cinema. So much so that most people probably don't even know that it was actually an adapted remake to begin with. But it opened my eyes to a lot of details, and a big one is the parts of the story that Rockstar chose to focus on, as Vassetti is of course a Tony Montana clone. We get the whole ruthless stranger in an unknown town plot point out of the way relatively quickly, which opens up the full map a lot earlier on, so we can make the most of it, thankfully. And it's really not long at all before we take over the estate of our former crime boss and start to rake it in.
Say goodnight, Mr. Diaz.
The success montage in this part of the film shows Montana taking over the city, indulging in the big-time lifestyle and expanding his empire, which for the most part is glossed over as the scene conveys all of the information it needs to in order for the story to advance. Vice City, however, has the luxury of allowing players to actually experience this aspect of the story firsthand and really feel like they're building this thing up themselves. And I fucking love that. One of my favourite GTA clones is The Godfather 2, which places a large emphasis on control of illegal businesses and juggling the life of a top mafia guy. And coincidentally, that game also largely takes place in a Miami setting. But one of GTA's greatest ideas has got to be the ownership of property. In an open world where money is the primary symbol of success, we need an incentive to earn, and so the ability to double your profits makes perfect sense. Along with additional homes that you can purchase around the city, varying from tin shacks to titanic apartment complexes, which all allow you reprieve at a safe location far more frequently. The option to also purchase various businesses around the map, from ice cream factories, taxi cab companies, and the nightclub, which is of course a direct knockoff of the Babylon Club from the movie, all give the entire game a much needed dose of motivation. Each of these spin the story off in multiple directions with their own set of missions, which is really cool. It gives each asset in the game and all of the additional side objectives and collectibles that purpose that I've been looking for within the open world and the narrative as a whole. It's actually quite sneaky how well Rockstar are able to make you feel like you've got options of different pathways and opportunities, when really, this is all playing out predetermined. That is the best part of Vice City, in my opinion, is having that illusion of freedom to carve your own path. And with completion of these different businesses grants us with further rewards, such as access to stronger, crazier weapons, or the ability to do street races and own a car dealership to get some rad new rides, which then often help out while doing some other missions. But on top of all of that, these businesses can earn you money by simply being under your control, which is great, in theory. I do enjoy that mechanic from a crime-inspired game, but like a lot of games with similar management systems, it's not long before the scales tip and the game is no longer challenging as you're not limited by your funds. But still, this is a quality concept that would go on to define a large chunk of San Andreas as well, which is often heralded as the greatest game out of the entire franchise. So seeing the origins of that mechanic in Vice gets me really excited and honestly repairs a lot of what I've found to be lacking in the game overall. So for what is the first, and really the only GTA game which truly parodied a movie for its entire plotline, I am glad to come out of the other side with such a major evolution on the franchise's game mechanics. But look, where the game still fails, in my opinion, is with the much more blatant, direct imitations. Scarface isn't merely a setting to allow for the events to take place in the game. Scarface is the narrative unfolding while you play. And listen, there is nothing wrong with taking inspo from pop culture, but while GTA 3's Goodfellas influence merely serves as a backdrop to the overall story of the city, Vice to me often feels like a box. Like things only exist and happen here for the sake of giving that illusion. And Well, obviously, right? It's a fucking video game. Of course that's what it's doing. But for me, I find it way more noticeable here in comparison to GTA 3 and San Andreas, which would follow. And every single time I try to wrap my head around why that might be, my mind always comes back to its inspiration, like it's trying too hard to fit within certain confines in order to duplicate something else, reducing any potential innovations down to mere mild amusements. And upon reflecting on the actual narrative here, the key story beats, the characters, and the outcome, which takes place almost identically as it does in the film, leaves me feeling much less fulfilled playing the game today. Now, for a game set in the 80s when counterculture and rebellion really took over, as one of the largest modern embodiments of that mindset, Rockstar kind of dropped the ball with this one. I mean, truly, ask yourself, what does Vice City actually do to trend set and stand out from the crowd? Not a whole lot. The violence and shock factor, even by 2002, was beginning to lose its edge, especially when set to the same tune of an iconic film notorious for its violence. That is a much different reality than the gritty aura of merely being dropped into a big city and being forced to make ends meet. You know, I can't sit here coming off of praising GTA 3 for the way it makes you feel without looking to Vice City and only really feeling like it's nothing more than more of the same. And listen, there is nothing wrong with more of the same if it's still good, which this is. Look, I ain't knocking the formula or the technicalities of the gameplay or anything like that. I'm just saying that the way Rockstar's reputation precedes their games, I don't see this as their best work. In fact, far from it. Now, I know that I mentioned at the top that this game was made in under a year, and perhaps it could be argued that any lack in quality or advancements could be attributed towards that fact, right? Which is definitely an easy stance to take retrospectively, but even when we do focus in and look at everything else on offer around that time, the face value of it being a classic GTA game simply doesn't hold up nearly as strong as I would have liked it to. You know, I went into this retrospective expecting to see a very direct upward swing in quality through these games, and before playing it, I was expecting that I was probably going to give Vice City an 8 out of 10. But I'm sorry to say that I can't go any higher than another 7 out of 10. Look, it's still good, I still get my money's worth out of it, and I can appreciate what it offered to the formula from a gameplay and narrative perspective. But I'm also really glad that this was the last time a GTA game truly followed the story beats of an already existing masterpiece, scene for scene. Rockstar's best work has always been in period pieces. And sure, as far as the 80s nostalgia is concerned, this is certainly a great tribute. But the invention of original characters, the struggles and successes, is what I'm missing most from this game. I'm sorry to all of the Vice heads that I'm going to upset with this video, but listen, more so than any other game on the market right now, I cannot wait to see this remastered in its upcoming sequel. I mean, it's going to be the fucking tits, and that's a fact. To see these streets burst into life and to finally get that Vice experience I've been hoping for all these years now is a dream scenario for me. But truth be told, there was also Vice City Stories released in 2006, which is actually the only GTA game of this era that I've never played myself, hence why I've failed to mention it in the video until now. So I am excited to see how that one holds up sometime in the future. As for my next video though, be sure to stay tuned for the big motherfucker, San Andreas. Until then, remember to subscribe and share this video with your friends if you've enjoyed it. If you want more GTA content, I've got some exclusive videos over on Patreon, so if you think I've earned it, then you can consider supporting me over there as we get closer and closer to 60,000 subscribers and almost 200 episodes now. Hell yeah, guys. Thank you all so much for watching. I'm Square Eyed Jack, and I hope you have a great fucking day. Cheers.